Welcome back to the Sweepstakes College Baseball Podcast. We have now gone through 2 full weeks of college baseball. A lot of exciting games played over the past few weeks, especially in those tournament round robin settings. Just to highlight a few, Arkansas played an amazing game against Oregon State. Looked like a College World Series game there, and the atmosphere was pretty electric as well. But yeah, going from there, we're going to jump straight into our player of the week, which is going to stay right in that game with the left-handed pitcher, starting pitcher for Arkansas, Hagen Smith. 17 strikeouts, and he had 15 through 5 innings, which is every single out. Ridiculous to see a performance like that. And last week, our player of the week was a bit of a meme with Matt Massiangelo with his 8 hit-by pitches, but you really just can't look past a performance like Hagen Smith against top 5 competition, being able to do something like that. And even though he didn't get the win, the team did, and really set them up for success there.
Yeah, there's been quite a few incredible individual performances these first 2 weeks, especially with a lot of these top teams playing some underwhelming opponents. But for Hagen Smith to do this against one of the best offenses in the country in Oregon State, super impressive. Was my preseason pick for pitcher of the year. So happy to see him tallying up those strikeouts and racking up and building that resume for the end of the year.
Yeah, he didn't have a great week 1, so good to see him back on the horse and get things settled against really, really tough competition. And then going to our top play of the week, we'll play that now.
Play. Puts the bunt down. Here's a squeeze, and the Cowboys win it. The marathon in Arlington is over in 14 innings.
This is also sticking in the same little tournament setting, and this time against Arkansas with the walk-off bunt by Lane Forsythe for Oklahoma State in the 14th inning. Electric play. There are a few other plays up for contention for this, but the moment just doesn't get brighter, and being able to lay a bunt down like that with 2 strikes is pretty ridiculous, and you got to have a lot of confidence in your coaching staff and players mutually to be able to pull off a play like that.
Yeah, this moment was just completely amplified by the fact that it was in the 14th inning, and he also had 2 strikes on him. Just makes it that much more exciting and thrilling. And yeah, what an awesome game that was. Just an awesome weekend altogether at that round robin.
Yeah, to be able to pull off the upset especially just moves it up another notch. And then new to this week's podcast, we're going to make the addition of the sweep setback of the week. This is for a team or position group, something like that had a really rough weekend or week overall. And for the first one of this year, we're going to start it off with Iowa, especially the bullpen. Not a great week overall. Starting things off, they were expected to do pretty well in a pretty competitive weekend series, another tournament-style situation. Beginning of the week, they played a non-Division I opponent, got the win there, but did not get any for the rest of the week and had leads in all of their weekend games and blew all of them late. So really unfortunate there, and you want to see the pitching staff to be able to handle something like that, especially when you have Brody Brecht at the start of that Friday game.
Yeah, definitely a tough setback. I think this also kind of goes back to their last game of last week as well. I believe it was Albany they lost to on Sunday. So even though they pick up that midweek win, this is just kind of becomes a tough stretch altogether. I know we're only in the second week here, but it's tough to lose to a team that you certainly should beat and then also not be able to close out all these games when you had a lead and had control of the game.
Yeah, and they should be in another competitive series this weekend at Ole Miss, so they can turn it around quickly, but definitely need to be at the top of their game to be able to perform, and that bullpen has been a little bit of an issue so far, so we'll see what happens there. But now we're going to go into recapping our series predictions from the past weekend. We started things off last week. We'll show it on screen now with the UCLA at TCU series. I chose TCU. Kevin, you chose UCLA. Unfortunate They get the sweep there over UCLA at home. Was a competitive series overall, but TCU was able to show that they deserve to be a top 10 team and potentially pushing for that top 5 spot.
Yeah, I'm not too down on UCLA after this weekend. I think it speaks more to the overall talent of and completeness of TCU's team. Like you said, it was mostly a competitive series, and UCLA to hang in there on the road still impressive. But yeah, I think TCU is just a really solid squad right now.
Yeah, we have them ranked high for a reason, so they got the job done there. Next up, the other major series this past week was East Carolina versus North Carolina. A good home and neutral site games for them. We both chose East Carolina, and they got the job done. Super competitive games all throughout. Really could have gone either way, but we'll take that tally point right there.
Yeah, super competitive series. Felt like a super regional preview, almost that type of atmosphere. Yeah, just altogether two really good teams, and awesome to see them play tight games in each one.
Yeah, and the third series was NC State at Hawaii. Could have been somewhat of a upset bid there because Hawaii is such a different atmosphere. You're kind of getting a vacation in the very beginning of the season. It's hard to know how NC State would be able to handle it. They did pretty well. They won the series, and we both picked them to win, so we'll take that.
Yeah, solid series win on the road. Nothing's a given out in Hawaii. That's a long trip, but yeah, good to see them pick up that series.
Yeah. Next up was UConn at Cal. I went Cal. You went UConn. Cal was able to figure it out and look like a team that could be vying to be in the top 25 now. So really impressed by how they started the season.
Yeah, Cal is certainly looking legit right now. Certainly a fringe top 25 team for us, and maybe in there if they perform well in their little round robin this weekend.
Yeah, and then lastly, our final prediction was Navy versus Air Force. I went Air Force, you went Navy, and once again, I was able to get the win. So that concludes a 5-0 weekend for me, and you went 2-3. Little unlucky there, but yeah, I mean, my picks are just better. What can I say?
Yeah, Air Force definitely has some top end talent on that team, but I thought Navy might be able to pull it out, but unfortunately, not the right pick this weekend.
Yeah, so now overall, the standings are I'm 8-2, Kevin is 5-5. So have some ground to make up there, but have a long season ahead of us to be able to string some wins together. But we'll uh, we'll keep you posted. There will be another video later this week that'll have our series predictions for this upcoming weekend, weekend 3. Few good series out there, some rivalries, and should be super exciting. But after that, we're gonna jump into our rankings for this week. Not a ton of movement at the top. A lot of teams just kind of did their job. We can run through the top teams pretty quickly here, but definitely at the back end there was some shuffling going on. But starting things off, number one still Wake Forest. They did get their first loss of the season in a midweek, but was able to sweep Dayton over the weekend and looked relatively dominant for the most part there.
Yeah, I mean, dropped the midweek, wasn't really too worrisome, and yeah, took care of business the rest of the weekend. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was their best weekend by any means, but still just altogether, we know the high end of this team and expect them to get clicking again moving forward.
Yeah, and that two, staying at two is Florida now 5-1 after starting 0-1 from their first weekend, but getting a 5-0 week there against you know what could be considered okay competition. Columbia has been a decent team recently, and being able to sweep that series and pretty much no games were close. I feel like this kind of allowed Florida to get back in the groove of things. I feel like Florida, a lot of rankings dropped them down pretty quickly after playing one game. I feel like that's a little harsh, and we decided not to do that, and they kind of were able to prove that they deserve to be in that 2 spot.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard for these top teams to stay motivated in these early weeks when they're playing really underwhelming competition, and you know that it's going to be an easy series win most of the time. But I think Florida being 0-1 in that first week kind of helped motivate them for this week and really make sure they stayed on top of things and played up to their level.
Yeah, they looked dominant there. And then at 3, staying at 3 from last week, is Arkansas, 5-2 overall now, so got another loss, but it was against Oklahoma State. Super competitive game, went extras, and yeah, we all know how that ended up, but was able to get maybe the best win from a top team this year so far against Oregon State in a super competitive game. This whole weekend series was really electric from an atmosphere and just gameplay standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, right now Arkansas is certainly looking like an Omaha contender, and like you said, probably picked up the best win in the country for a top 25 team, taking down Oregon State in a really exciting matchup there. And yeah, Arkansas is really just looking the part right now, especially that pitching staff.
Yeah. And after that, another SEC team. We went back to back to back. LSU staying at 4, 7-1 overall, 5-1 week. Didn't face the best competition, so maybe would like to see better production overall, but really can't complain with a 5-1 week.
Yeah, and Stony Brook continues that revenge in LSU, but LSU hangs on for a 4-1 week, and just really dominated competition, and yeah, just another case of top end team taking care of kind of lousy competition in these early weeks.
Yep, and then at 5, Oregon State staying in that spot, 7-1 overall, had a 5-1 week. The only game that was really close was the game against Arkansas, which they ended up losing. But besides that, they kind of just demolished the competition. And, they had good games facing Michigan and Oklahoma State. And Texas Tech midweek. So really impressive overall to be able to get 5-1. Obviously would like to have that win over Arkansas just because of how competitive it was, but impressed by Oregon State overall.
Yeah, that Texas Tech win made this week a lot more impressive for them. Nice to do that all on the road or neutral site, I guess, but a lot further away from Oregon than those other teams. So nice to see them playing well, and yeah, especially that offensive group looked like it could be one of the better position player groups in the country right now.
For sure. And then at 6, staying at 6, TCU, 7-0, the first team that hasn't had a loss on this ranking so far, 4-0 over the past week, and swept UCLA. So really, really good results. I feel like TCU, in most other situations, would be able to rise a spot or two in the rankings, but really there was just no room to go up with how all the other top teams did.
Yeah, just completely looked the part this week. Like you said, kind of feels like they should be a little higher in the rankings, but there's just not really a spot to put them right now. But in the end, it looks like they're kind of destined right now for another run at Omaha back-to-back years.
Yep, and then at 7, another team staying in their spot is Tennessee, 5-0 this past week, 7-1 overall. Definitely easier schedule this week. Not tough competition, but they did have a tough schedule first week, so kind of have that break to split things up a bit before getting back into the thick of things. But yeah, can't really complain, but nothing really to be impressed by with the competition that they faced.
Yeah, not that impressive for them to take down some lesser competition, but good for them to take care of business and go undefeated on the week.
Yep, and then at 8, once again, a team staying in the same spot is Duke, 7-0. So another team undefeated so far. Faced Liberty and Northwestern. So they looked good overall, but once again, it was mediocre competition. So just want to see them continue to do well and get those wins.
Yeah, yep. Same thing as we said for a lot of these teams, just taking care of business against lesser competition. But yeah, another team that once again is looking the part right now, even though it's against some weaker opponents.
Yeah, and surprise, surprise, rinse and repeat for number 9, Texas A&M. Also went 4-0, 7-0 overall, and against mediocre competition. So got the job done. Nothing to complain about, but yeah.
Yep, just taking care of business once again. Another SEC team just sweeping through the week and just taking care of things right now.
Yeah, and then at 10, again, same team, East Carolina. This time they actually faced good competition. They went 2-2, so maybe could have had a better week, but they were at Campbell where they got their first loss, and then in a super competitive series with North Carolina was able to win the weekend series. So can't complain too much just because of the level of competition they face playing only ranked teams. So impressed overall, even though it was a 2-2 week.
Yeah, exactly. 2-2 week doesn't sound the best, but when all four games are against ranked opponents, it is a solid week, and especially when you do win the weekend series, that definitely played a part in us keeping them exactly where they were.
Yep. And 11, we have NC State staying in the same spot. They could have been able to jump East Carolina if they could have had a better week, but going 2-1 just wasn't able to get that done at Hawaii. Maybe a sweep there. They're able to jump East Carolina, but yeah, they were in a competitive series at Hawaii, so staying in the same spot there as well.
Yeah, not surprised to see them not pull off the sweep traveling all the way to Hawaii. It's a tough place to play and stay on top of things, so not surprised to see them drop one, but definitely good that they hung on for the series win.
Yep, and now at 12, we finally have some movement. After 11 straight picks, we have a new team changing spots with Virginia at 12 after going 4-0 this past week in a round robin style event and 7-0 overall as a team. Oh yeah, they beat Wichita State and ranked Iowa as well as Auburn, who was right on the fringe of being ranked last week, and will not spoil anything for later. But yeah, impressive that they were able to go undefeated there in super competitive games. A lot of good competition, and yeah, they were able to close everything out.
Yeah, definitely looking the part right now, and one of the more complete weeks out of all the teams on this list. That was some good competition in that round robin there, and yeah, they certainly looked the part in all those games.
Yep, and then at 13 we have Clemson dropping back one spot after going 3-1. So maybe a bit of a surprise after having a pretty good week record wise, but the Kennesaw State series was very close, and the results definitely helped them out a bit. But the second game having 6 errors for Clemson, definitely something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I mean, can't drop them too much because they did go 3-1.
Yeah, like you said, did take care of business in the end of things, but it wasn't the cleanest week by any means. And yeah, you're going to want to see them clean things up defensively and kind of win these weeks a little easier than that one.
Yep. Next up at 14, we have Texas after going 4-0 and sweeping Cal Poly on the weekend without giving up a run. So even though the competition might not have been great, uh, you got to say something about the pitching staff not giving up a single run over the weekend is super impressive.
Yeah, it's especially impressive in a series like that when the games aren't particularly close because a lot of these top end teams, if they're up multiple runs late in the game, they're going to be putting in some freshman arms, some guys that are less experienced or not as solidified in the rotation, and so super impressive to not give up a run even in those situations with some new faces going out on the mound. Yeah, really impressive for them to do that.
Yeah. Next up, we have South Carolina at 15, jumping up a spot, 4-1 overall this week. Not great competition, but they dominated every game besides the game they lost. They lost 11-2, so it was a bit of a surprise there. But everything else, they were just crushing the competition. So deserved to jump up a spot.
Yeah, pretty complete squad here, especially on the offensive side of things, and yeah, handled some lesser competition. Not quite on the level of these top end teams at the top of our rankings, but certainly solid and has the potential to be up there eventually.
Yeah, and then at 16, the team that has just continued to drop, even though they're not playing awful, they just continue to drop down our rankings. We started with them already pretty low, but Vanderbilt with 5-3 overall, 3-2 the past week. It's just not a great record to have against the competition they're facing, and we already had some question marks, and it seems like they're not getting answered super quickly. So definitely some, you know, worrying results because they're not facing great opponents and games are pretty close and they're losing a few here and there.
Yeah, we're certainly low on Vanderbilt compared to other rankings, but I think so far through these first 2 weeks, their level of play has certainly reflected our ranking more than these higher ones. They don't really look the part right now altogether, dropping some games to teams you wouldn't expect them to drop to. And, like last game on Sunday, giving up a 9 spot to Gonzaga, who was 0-5 going into that game. It's not really a good look. And yeah, they're really going to need to clean things up to get on the level that everyone else thinks they're at.
Yeah, and right behind them at 17 is another SEC team in Alabama, 8-0 overall, 5-0 the past week, and yeah, outclassed some bad competition. Nothing really else to say there.
Yeah, just took care of business. Like you said, nothing much to it, just beating lesser opponents.
Yep. At 18, we have Indiana, 4-0 this past week, and a sweep at Baylor, which is impressive, even though Baylor has shown that maybe they're not the most competitive team overall. It's still something to sweep a team on the road where that you usually don't face, and it's kind of out of the blue there. So, like to see that from Indiana.
Yeah, and I don't think Baylor's record really reflects the capabilities of that squad right now. Played some really tough competition these first 2 weeks, so I do think that is an impressive sweep for Indiana on the road, and they're certainly one of our biggest risers to start this season. Really looking good these first couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And then at 19, we have North Carolina. Went 2-2, so not the best week record-wise, but we mentioned it earlier. Had a super competitive series versus East Carolina. Really could have gone either way, so not super upset with how things fell. And 2-2 is going into a week like that, kind of what you'd expect from a team like North Carolina in the rankings.
Yeah, my preseason pick for most overrated team, but they looked anything but overrated this week. I know they lost the series, but they looked super competitive playing against a very talented team in East Carolina, and they were looking the part even though they did drop that series.
Yep. Next up at 20, we have Texas Tech, team that started the season unranked for us, but was just on the fringe there. They went 4-1 the past week, and yeah, their one loss was against Oregon State. So unfortunately, they lost the one game against good competition, but put up just buckets of run and broke some records over the weekend. So kind of was able to balance that out by just showing how dominant their offense could be if they really get a handle on that ball.
Yeah, not at all a bad loss to drop that game to Oregon State, but it seemed like they took it personally because the offense was putting up crazy numbers the rest of the week. That was unreal. And yeah, they looked like they have things clicking up to the plate right now.
Yeah, and after that, following right behind, they were right behind them last week, is Campbell. Went 4-0, able to beat East Carolina midweek, which is a huge win, and swept the weekend against bad competition Ohio. But yeah, super impressed by getting that win midweek, and you kind of need to do that for a team that's started out unranked for us, but and won't have a ton of opportunities to beat top talent teams.
Yeah, and I think the moving up this ranking a little more is definitely justified after them winning that East Carolina game. Just solidified them all the more after taking that series against Santa Barbara last weekend. Yeah, certainly looking the part right now, and this is the last of our, I believe it's 8 or 9 Carolina teams in the rankings. So pretty unreal, but that geographical region is pretty good at baseball apparently.
Yeah, the past few years have just been dominated by it recently. So, yeah, a lot of good teams, and yeah, it's shown in our rankings. But after that, at 22, we have UC Santa Barbara, 2-1 on the week, 3-3 overall. Had a rough week one, but it was super competitive against Campbell. But yeah, I mean, 2-1, okay week. Would have liked to see 3-0 against Sacramento State, but it was on the road, so tough to be able to sweep there, and they really dominated after their first game, which they lost. So was able to bounce back there and able to stay in our rankings for another week if they can turn things around. We'll see really tough competition next week, which could determine if they stay in the rankings.
Yeah, solid week, good bounce back after dropping that tough series on the road. Like you said, big series coming up, playing at Oregon, who's a fringe top 25 team for us. It's probably one of those series where whoever wins that series is in the rankings and the other one isn't. So I'll be curious to see how that one goes.
Yeah, for sure. We're on the same page there. At 23, we stuck with UCLA, staying in our rankings after going 0-3 the past week. That was, of course, on the road at TCU. So tough stretch there. Would have really liked to see them grab at least one game, but the games were pretty competitive for the most part. At least two of them were right within arm's reach, just not able to get the final blow there, and eventually ended up getting swept. And now at 3-3, felt like they should be around the same spot as where UCSB is. So sticking UCLA right behind them. Even after dropping 6 spots from last week, they still have a chance to prove that they're a ranked team.
Yeah, definitely a tough week result wise, but I don't think their level of play was too demoralizing and not too down on this team right now. Yeah, it was kind of tough to decide whether to drop them or keep them in the rankings, but I think we still have some belief in the upside of this team and really weren't too down about how they played.
Yep, for sure. And then at 24, our first team jumping into the rankings is UC Irvine. So that's the third straight UC school in our rankings. They went 3-0 the past week at Tulane. So good weekend result on the road. They were just a fringe team outside our rankings last week, and a few spots opened up from Iowa and Kansas State after not having great weekends themselves.
Yeah, impressive sweep on the road, and this was a team that we thought should have made the tournament last year, but didn't end up getting a spot. And looks like they're continuing to play good baseball and keep that momentum going from the end of the year, even though they didn't make it in.
Yep, for sure. And rounding out our top 25, another new team, and that is Auburn. Went 3-1 the past week, 2-1 over the weekend, beating what was a ranked Iowa and Wichita State and losing to ranked Virginia. So really good competition. Going 2-1 is a good result overall, and with them being just a fringe team last week on the outside of the rankings, being able to jump in that spot, definitely reasonable, especially because they beat one of the teams that dropped out.
Yeah, this team's looking good right now, and yeah, even that loss to Virginia was a competitive game, and I think they certainly looked the part of a top 25 team, even though they dropped that game.
Yep, and then some of the teams, we've mentioned it already, that are right outside the rankings. We got Oregon and Cal from the Pac-12 there. All they need is just a good series win, I think, to be able to jump in, and maybe a team that doesn't do too well right at the back end of the rankings. But they're right there. I got Indiana State, Dallas Baptist, and Oklahoma, as well as teams that are very fringe and could jump in if anything changes.
Yeah, I think those are the main teams I have there. I'd say Cal and DBU are probably my 26, 27 right now, and yeah, like you mentioned, a couple of those other teams right there on the fringe as well. But yeah, a lot of teams pecking right, trying to get in this top 25 right now.
Yep, so that concludes our top 25 rankings for week 2 of college baseball. Be sure to keep out an eye later in the week for our weekend series predictions. And yeah, over the weekend, we will be posting our best bets to YouTube just as comments or whatever, and on Twitter. Keep an eye out for that because you can make some money from what we're saying. But this is no betting advice, of course.